I first heard of Blackthorn Village through a footnote in an obscure medical journal from 1904, terse reference to anomalous contagion among its parishioners. At the time, it seemed a misprint, perhaps a sensationalist, aside by an overzealous county coroner. But when I obtained the original county records, the entry was unmistakable. What transpired between April and June of 1903 did not fit any known pathology. By the spring of 1903, Blackthorn Village was an unremarkable cluster of timber homes nestled in a fold of the Appalachian foothills. Its 90 souls eked out a living by subsistence farming, and the sporadic riches of iron were hidden in nearby crags. In every sense, it belonged to an America, still bound to the land in two traditions older than the Republic. At the center of the village's small social sphere stood Father Ambrose Cullen, a gaunt, bespectacled man whose solemn sermons filled the wooden pews each Sabbath. He carried with him a reputation for healing in both spiritual and somatic senses. Rumor held that, as a young priest in Philadelphia, he had assisted in early experiments with antiseptic treatments, though no formal records survive. To the faithful, he was a conduit of mercy. In hushed tones, a few spoke of miracles, the lame walking, fevers broken in hours. It began in the first mention in the parish register, April 14th, Mary Ellen. Prior complained of nightmares and unceasing chills. Fever at dusk. Mary Ellen was a quiet girl of 17. Her illness might have drawn no more than a passing mention, but for the odd notation scrawled by Father Cullen, eyes luminous at night, above normal vigor at dawn. By April 17th, 2 more cases. John Brewster, the blacksmith, suffering convulsions, and old Mrs. Cadwell, who claimed to hear voices in the wind. Both, it was recorded, were seen in the glow of the moon, with pupils unnaturally dilated, tracking some unseen movement in the treetops. When Father Cullen administered his blessed tincture in amber liquid brewed from roots and administered with whispered prayers, all symptoms abated temporarily. My research led me to the hospital records in Morgantown, some 20 miles distant. Dr. Horace Latham's ledger recounts how 2 villagers were admitted on April 22nd with acute delirium tremens. Despite no history of alcohol abuse, Dr. Latham noted peculiar marked spiral abrasions on their forearms, as though clawed by a thumb and forefinger. His final annotation, marked atrophy of cerebellar tissue upon examination, suggest inquiry into local superstitions. By early May, the village atmosphere had shifted. Farms lay untended. Families barricaded themselves indoors. Children whispered of luminous figures by the creek at dusk. Livestock perished without fever or wounds, only empty eyes staring at the sky. Father Cullen's bulletin, painstakingly handwritten, urged calm and faith. We stand on the threshold of a trial ordained by Providence. I traveled to Blackthorn in late June, nearly 3 months after the first entries. The town was nearly deserted. Doors hung ajar. An oppressive stillness blanketed the streets. In the church, I found Cullen's ledger pages torn and water stand its final entry, dated June 2nd. Transformation complete in 8 souls. See to their passage. Mercy, not God, is denied. Below this, a single line. They ascend at midnight. I combed the woods behind the church. Under the twisted boughs of an ancient blackthorn tree, I discovered crude stones arranged in concentric circles in impossible geometry. Each standing stone carved with symbols I could not decipher, spirals within triangles, circles bisected by errant lines. At the center lay fragments of bone, bleached white, and shards of broken glass that once held Cullen's tincture. The ground was unnaturally bare, as if nothing living could take root there again. That night, I lodged in the Miller boarding house. Sleep eluded me. Through the thin walls, I heard faint chanting. At the window, I glimpsed pale forms drifting. Toward the church, their movements to fluid, to synchronized limbs, bending at impossible joints, heads tilted at unnatural angles. They gathered beneath the bell tower, eyes glowing like embers. When the clock struck midnight, the bell tolled once, a sound that rattled the panes, and the forms scattered into the dark. I fled before dawn, but I could not leave the questions unanswered. In the months since, I have pieced together fragments, letters from a nun in Baltimore, describing Cullen's obsession with bridging science and faith, a cryptic pamphlet warning of the Second Pentecost, an event that once begun could not be undone. And so I return to this ledger, to those concentric stones, to the villagers whose fates are unmarked in any census. Something unholy was birthed in Blackthorn in 1903, a transformation that fused flesh and spirit into something neither living nor dead. Have you heard of this? Would you have chosen differently? When I returned to Blackthorn Village in the autumn of 1903, the air had grown thinner, as if the hills themselves recoiled from what had transpired. The mills lay silent. Where once iron song had echoed through the valley, now only crows called. I moved from house to house, seeking survivors or descendants. But each threshold I crossed bore the same story. A family gone, a door left open, and a hush that smothered speech. My first tangible lead was Elias Wren, the village carpenter, whom records showed living through the summer unscathed. His workshop half-collapsed sat at the village's western edge. Inside, I found splintered benches and scattered tools. But most unsettling were the walls themselves. Dozens of scratched symbols, identical to those I'd seen beneath the Blackthorn Grove, carved with a fevered hand. Among them was the single glyph repeated most often, spiral encircled by 6 radiating lines. Beneath it, a phrase in spidery script, "The flesh is but the vessel." I located Wren at a poorhouse in Morgantown, gaunt and muttering to himself. He refused to discuss Blackthorn until I produced a fragment of the church's plaster and unassuming chip etched with one radiating line. Only then did his gaze sharpen, his breath hitching as if he inhaled shock. "They made me choose," he rasped, voice low, "between the body and the promise beyond. I carved those symbols, ... to remember." He drew me a crude map of the village's underground cisterns, linked by a narrow tunnel to the church cellar. Cullen opened the sluice, Wren croaked, and the waters flowed through, infused with his tincture. We drank, we changed. Following his directions, I descended into damp darkness. The air reeked of rot and something metallic. My lantern's beam caught stained bricks, slick with black mold, yet beneath the sheen, I saw traces of an oily residue. Every step echoed until I reached an iron-bound hatch. Behind it, a flooded chamber stretched into an alien gloom. The water's surface shimmered as if alive. My reflection stared back, hollow-eyed, haunted. Leaving the cistern, I pored over correspondence from Father Cullen to Dr. Latham. In one letter, Cullen boasted of purifying the mortal frame, citing experiments with boric acid and mercury. "Salts. Faith must be the catalyst," he wrote, "but chemistry shall perfect the work." Yet an endnote betrayed his trembling hand. "I fear the alchemy has exceeded my prayer." That night, I dreamt of the villagers. I stood among them at the church steps, their faces contorted in ecstasy and pain. One by one, they extended arms tendrils of light knitting their fingertips. A low hum vibrated in my chest, and the world dissolved into spirals of black and silver. I awoke choking, my pillow damp with sweat. Over the next fortnight, I uncovered more testimonies in neighboring counties, travelers who claimed to see flickering lights in Blackthorn's valley at odd hours, a family passing through whose horse bolted when they neared the old church, and a doctor in West Virginia who noted 3 patients with inexplicable traces of heavy metal, poisoning symptoms eerily similar to Cullen's tincture victims. But the most disturbing account came from a journal kept by Sister Agnes, a nun dispatched to assist Cullen in May 1903. Her final entry smudged and stained described a midnight gathering in the nave. She witnessed 8 figures, rendered near mute by the transformation, kneeling in perfect alignment. Cullen spoke in tongues. The congregation replied in unison, their voices warped, syllables stretching beyond human range. When the ritual ended, the church floor was littered with insects, millions of ants, dead yet whole, their bodies arranged in fractal patterns. Sister Agnes fled before dawn, but not before stealing a vial of the tincture. She noted its color had turned from honey amber to molten silver, and that the liquid seemed to pulse with internal light. In her haste, she spilled some on her hand. It ate through her glove, searing her flesh hand, Yet she felt no pain, only a cold elation, as if her very bones hummed with potential. Her journal closes abruptly on June 5th. I am no longer Sister Agnes. I belong to what Father called the true communion. If you read this, beware the waters. I revisited the creek that bisects the village outskirts, where locals once drank and washed. The banks were overgrown, but I found fragments of glass bottles, some still stained silver. I filled a vial from the stream. Under my microscope, motes of iridescent sediment swirled like galaxies. I felt the pull of something ancient, as if the creek itself had become a conduit between flesh and otherworldly purpose. Now, having collected these scattered pieces, I sensed the full magnitude of Blackthorn's tragedy. It was never merely an illness, but an intentional orchestration, a fusion of science and sacrament to transcend mortality. Yet the price was villagers' humanity, their bodies reshaped into vessels for something beyond comprehension. I prepare for my next journey into the village's ruins, to uncover what became of those chosen eight. If I fail, their story may remain buried in time, whispered only in footnotes. And so I ask, would you drink from that water if offered a promise of transcendence? That morning, I set out before dawn, carrying only my lantern, journal, and the vial of creek water. The mist lingered in the hollows, curling like restless spirits around the skeletal remnants of homesteads. I reached the church ruins as the first pale light slid across the valley. The roof had collapsed, leaving only twisted rafters above a carpet of debris. Vines crawled over shattered pews, and shattered stained glass fluttered at my feet like fallen butterflies. I knelt beside the chancel and uncovered the flagstones Father Cullen once paced during his sermons. One slab, cracked by time, resisted. My hammer's tap. When I pried it free, I revealed a narrow stairway descending into darkness. The air below smelled of damp earth and something faintly metallic like the creek water itself. Torches in hand, I descended 6 uneven steps into a chamber hewn from bedrock. 8 niches lined the walls, each containing a rough-hewn plank. On each plank, skeletal remains lay draped in shreds of cassock or coarse homespun. In 2 niches, the bones had been stripped clean. In the others, brittle fragments of skin clung. In a silver sheen dot at the chamber's center stood a stone basin, its sides decorated with the spiralandre glyph. The basin brimmed with the same iridescent water I'd sampled outside. I dipped my finger in and felt the familiar tingle and echo of Sister Agnes's cold elation. Before I could withdraw, a whisper echoed, dry, rasping, yet unmistakably human behind me. I spun. In the torchlight, I saw them, 8 figures stepping from their niches, flesh translucent as oil-slick water. Their limbs moved in unison, hips shifting at angles that no human joint should permit. Their eyes glowed a molten silver light. They tilted their heads as though hearing a distant command. Fear lodged in my throat, but I forced myself to hold their gaze. From the basin they advanced, voices rising in a dissonant chorus that scraped at sanity. I stumbled backward, knocking over a torch. Flames licked the basin's surface, and in an instant the water hissed and evaporated, leaving only a fine, glittering dust. Silence fell so suddenly it deafened. The figures halted, standing in a perfect circle around me. Their mouths opened, but no sound emerged, only a soft glow from their throats, as if their voices were swallowed whole. I raised my vial. "This ends tonight," I whispered, though whether I meant to end their ritual or my own terror, I could not say. I uncorked it and splashed the stream water onto the nearest figure. Its skin rippled, then recoiled like fabric scorched by acid. The glow in its eyes flared brighter, then winked out, replaced by dull, lifeless sockets. The others hissed together and surged forward. I backed toward the sturch step, the fallen bark of a coffin lid. Behind me, the figures reached for me with limbs too long, fingers too many. I slipped, rolling down into the corridor beyond, clutching my lantern. When I regained my feet, I found the basin empty, the niches vacant. Only my echoing breath remained. I scrambled up toward the daylight, bursting into the overgrown churchyard as the sun pierced the horizon. The world felt too solid, too bright. Now, back at my lodgings, the vial sits unopened on my desk. I have little time, my nights are ravaged by dreams of spiraled glyphs and that silent choir. I know they are incomplete, that something vital escaped with my flight. In my journal, I write this warning, asterisk, asterisk, do not seek the basin's waters. Do not pry at the bones of the chosen. Some thresholds, once crossed, cannot be retraced. And yet, I cannot abandon the search. There are still unanswered questions. What became of Father Cullen? What lies in the creek's depths? And are those figures truly dead, or merely dormant waiting for the next offering? Would you have fled, or stayed to see the final transformation? I returned yet again to Blackthorn Village, under the cloak of winter's first frost, determined to unearth the remains of Father Ambrose Cullen. Snow choked the paths, and the skeletal trees loomed like silent sentinels. The old rectory, in drifts, held my attention. According to parish tax rolls, the property had long since been abandoned, but local rumor insisted that a pale figure still haunted its upper chambers. Inside, the air reeked of decay and old incense. Icicles hung from the rafters like crystal daggers. I ascended the narrow staircase to what would have been Cullen's study. The threshold groaned under my weight. Within, I found overturned chairs, shattered books, and pinned to the wall a large sketch, the Blackthorn Grove in full bloom, with 8 shadowy silhouettes suspended among the branches. Beneath it, Father Cullen's scrawl, asterisk, asterisk, the Tree of Ascension. Asterisk, asterisk, at the center of the sketch, a single figure stood apart, arms outstretched. I recognized the posture, a pose of cruciform surrender. Could it be Cullen himself? Corners of the page was stained with a dark liquid blood, I assumed, though the color was impossibly silver. As I studied the drawing, a soft click echoed above. I looked up to see a trapdoor settling into place. The beam of my lamp caught cold stone steps, spiraling upward steps I had not noticed before. Compelled by both dread and fascination, I climbed out at the top. I emerged into an attic lined with dozens of crates and barrels. Many were labeled in Cullen's spidery hand. Asterisk, asterisk, containment phase 1, phase 2, final offering. One barrel lay open, revealing dozens of small vials filled with the silver liquid. Others were shattered, their contents seeping into the frozen planks. I pried open a nearby crate with trembling fingers. Inside lay a battered, leather-bound volume, Cullen's personal diary. Its pages crackled as I turned them. Early entries spoke of hope. May our parish be the first to know true communion. Midway through, the entries descended into mania. I heard their hearts. They call me Father of flesh and spirit. The waters tremble with expectation. The final entry, dated June 3rd, 1903, read, I shall join them at last. The tree awaits its apex. A sudden gust rattled the attic window. I turned, expecting wind, yet nothing moved outside. A slow rustling came from the crates. I held my breath as the lid shifted, one by one, revealing hollow niches carved into the wood. In each niche lay a rotted fragment of textile. Cassock, homespun coat, a child's dress, symbols of the villagers who had vanished. And at the far end of the room, suspended from a rafter by blackthorn vines, hung a single skeletal hand, fingers splayed in eternal benediction. I staggered back. The floorboards groaned under unseen weight, and from the rafters descended a shadow. Tall, gaunt, draped in the remnants of Father Cullen's cassock, its head chambered, a skull-like visage, but from its eye sockets glowed that familiar molten silver. It raised its hand in greeting, and I felt a pulse of recognition. It was him, yet not him. The first transformed priest. I fled without thought, stumbling down the attic stairs. Behind me, the echo of a chant, low and resonant, chased me through the halls as I burst into the cold air outside. The rectory door slammed shut of its own accord. I have since examined the diary with trembling care. Cullen believed the blackthorn trees themselves were conduits for divine energy, ancient arteries, through which celestial currents flowed. He envisioned a living cathedral of wood and bone, where the chosen would transcend flesh's decay. But in his final hours, he recorded fear. The currents scream in my ears. They demand completion. I am at their mercy. Asterisk, asterisk now. I pieced together a horrifying possibility, that Cullen, in his final act, bound his essence to the grove, becoming the tree's first lament, thus remains, haunting those ruins. The Church of Blackthorn once whispered that no oak or birch grows amid those hills, only these twisted blackthorns. Their roots drink deep of creek and cistern alike, fed by the same silver taint. I resolved to return one last time. If Cullen's spirit truly lingers in the roots and rafters, I must confront its bill, the final truth. Yet I dread what I may find. A sentient forest. Its branches composed of bone and flesh. Its leaves the eyelids of the damned. Would you dare follow me into that grove? Or would you leave the roots undisturbed, lest they entwine themselves around your soul? Under a leaden sky, I approached the Blackthorn Grove once more, my lantern's light swallowed by the tangle of thorns. Each step felt as though I trod across living tissue roots, pulsating faintly beneath fallen leaves. My heart pounded, echoing the distant thrum I'd first sensed in the cistern. I reminded myself, no myth, no superstition, no knee-cold evidence, and the ink of my own trembling hand. I found the central tree at the grove's heart. Its trunk gnarled into the semblance of a cruciform figure. Embedded in its bark were shards of glass, fragments of Cullen's vials, glinting like watchful eyes. Beneath them lay a shallow pit, its edges lined with bleached stones carved in that spiral Andre glyph. I knelt and placed my hand upon the bark. The surface pulsed beneath my palm, as if alive and aware. Asterisk, asterisk, I drew from my coat the battered diary, opening to Cullen's final entry. Asterisk, asterisk, the tree awaits its apex. I spoke aloud, voice cracking. Ambrose Cullen, I come to confront you. At my words, a low moan rose from the roots. The ground trembled, and the tree's branches shifted, flexing like jointed limbs. From the shadows emerged a procession. Not the 8 figures of before, but dozens of villagers long presumed lost each. Step measured, heads bowed, their eyes now dim and vacant. They formed a ring around the tree, their bodies swaying in silent requiem. A single figure detached itself and advanced. Sister Agnesor. What remained of her? Her robes hung in tatters, skin mottled silver and gray. She extended her hand toward the trunk. He calls, she whispered, voice hollow. He beckons us home. I raised my lantern to the spirals carved at her wrist, identical to those in Cullen's glyph. Before I could speak, her flesh dissolved into a cloud of silvery motes, drifting upward into the branches. The silver dust coalesced at the tree's apex, forming a human silhouette. Father Cullen, arms outstretched, his skull crowned by twisted blackthorn. The tree's pulse quickened. I staggered back as the circle of villagers began to chant, a soundless vibration that rattled my bones. The ground opened beneath the tree, revealing a cavern aglow with that same iridescent water. I glimpsed forms submerged, their limbs flailing, mouths agape in silent scream, bound by roots to a hidden reservoir. My lantern skittered across the sickly earth, guttering, drained of courage and warmth. I turned to flee and nearly tripped over the body of Elias Wren, lying half buried in thorn and frost. His eyes were open, pupils missing, leaving only dark hollows. Scribbled on his forehead, asterisk, asterisk, they are the harvest. A wind rose, whipping the villagers into a frenzy. They pressed forward, phantoms drawn by the tree's command. I ran, branches, clawing at my coat, silver motes seeding the air. As I broke free of the thicket, I heard the final toll, the tree's groan, a sound like bone against bone. Now, miles away and beneath the warmth of lamplight, I record this last fragment. The grove stands in. Cullen remains a dark apex to his abomination. The chosen may yet rise again when the waters flow, or when the silver dust drifts to willing lungs. So I leave you here. What would you sacrifice to know eternity? And if the grove still calls, will you answer? Under a moonless sky, I journeyed back to Blackthorn Valley, not as an outsider, but as someone bound to its secret by necessity. My nights had been plagued by visions of those sunken forms and the cavern faces I could not cleanse from memory. I carried maps, journals, and a flask of creek water sealed tight, though each sleepless hour urged me to uncork it. I arrived at the grove's perimeter just before dawn. The air was unnaturally still. Even the crows kept silent. At the grove's edge, I discovered fresh footprints, boot prints, not my own, pressed deeply into damp soil. Someone else had come. Fear coiled in my gut. Had another seeker fallen under the tree's lure? I followed the tracks to the old cistern entrance, where the hatch lay ajar. Torch in hand, I descended once more into the fetid darkness. The chamber was transformed. The iron hatch had been bent outward, and strange symbols different from Cullen's were painted in chalk upon the bricks. They resembled circuitry more than scripture, interlocking circles, parallel lines, and nodes. The oily residue on the floor had crystallized into shards that glinted like broken mirrors at the far end. The basin remained empty but ringed with fresh stains. On its rim, someone had scrawled in charcoal, asterisk, asterisk, phase omega begins. Beneath it, a collection of modern vials, sterile labeled with typed tags, lay scattered. My throat went dry. Evidence of a second hand, someone determined to continue what Cullen began, perhaps to perfect the process. I pocketed a vial and climbed back into the dawn. In the fading mist, I saw a figure watching me from the ridge tall, wrapped in a dark coat, face obscured. The silhouette nodded once and vanished into the trees. My pulse thundered, an ally or another victim of the grove's promise. Returning to my lodgings, I examined the new vials. Each bore chemical notations, boron 10, thallium traces, even small amounts of radium elements, far beyond Cullen's 1903 grasp. Someone was melding 20th century science to 19th century alchemy. In trembling script I noted, asterisk, asterisk, the work has transcended time. That night, I dreamed again, but the vision this time was mine. I stood at the basin's edge, as my own hands dipped the vial into the water. I drew the liquid to my lips, and for a moment, the world pulsed like a living organism. Then came the calm, the crystalline clarity, till the basin cracked, and I fell into its depths, eyes aflame, body transfigured. I awoke screaming, the echo of breaking glass still ringing. Now I understand the final truth. The grove's power is iterative. Each experiment feeds the next. Each transformation perfects the design. The tree of ascension never rests. Its roots search for fresh hosts. And if I do not act, another seeker, whether driven by curiosity or ambition, will become its next catalyst. I keep the new vials sealed, fearing that one drop might spell my undoing. The footprints at the cistern haunt me. Who walks these halls now, and with what purpose? Would you destroy those vials or unleash them to achieve what Father Cullen only began? I scarcely slept that night, haunted by the thought of the unknown visitor in the grove. By first light, I gathered lantern, journal, and one sealed vial, and set out again for Blackthorn. The valley was veiled in frost. Each footprint, my own or another's, glistened like a moment frozen in time. At the grove's edge, I discovered fresh claw marks gouged into the bark of a young blackthorn deep, uneven, as if made by something neither human nor beast. The glyphs I'd cataloged since April were carved anew beneath them, but twisted. Spirals became jagged, rays splintered into forks. A warning or an invitation. I followed a faint trail of silver dust that led away from the central tree toward the ruins of the church. There, in the fallen nave, I found markers, dozens of small flags planted in the dirt, each inscribed with a name some familiar, many unknown. The flags formed a path toward the altar. My heart pounded as I realized these must be the names of those who sought the basin, perhaps victims or collaborators. On the altar lay a single modern notebook bound in synthetic leather. Inside, neat entries dated last month described a methodical approach. Day 1, recovered tincture residue. Day 2, synthesized compound with boron catalyst. Day 3, field test on feral pigs, successful neural enhancement. Day 4, initiate human trial. The final page read simply, asterisk, asterisk, subject acquired. Phase omega commences at midnight. I felt a tremor of dread, a human trial. The notebook's owner had crossed the threshold. I searched the nave and discovered footprints leading down into the cellar hatch. With lantern held high, I climbed through the trapdoor into the cold stone passage. In the flickering light, I discerned movement ahead. The walls echoed with the low hum of equipment. Metal tables, glass tubing, and a bank of kerosene lamps humming. In unison, at the chamber's end, stood a figure hunched over an operating table. Beside it lay a bound form, shrouded in a stained sheet. "Who's there?" I rasped. The figure froze, then turned. Beneath a surgical mask and goggles, I glimpsed eyes that shone with the same molten silver I had seen in Mary Ellen Pryor's nightmares. The investigator had become the instrument. He lifted a scalpel. "You shouldn't have come," he whispered, voice uneven. "I need one more subject to complete the communion." I backed away, but the passage behind me sealed with a grinding thud. He approached the table and peeled back the sheet. I saw the bound figure's face on my breath. Caught it was Elias Wren, gaunt yet alive, eyes hollow but still flickering. With recognition, "Help me," he mouthed, voice a ghost. The investigator set down his scalpel and picked up a syringe filled with silver-hued fluid. "This is the final formula," he murmured. "It will perfect what Cullen began. You will see beyond flesh itself." My hand closed around the vial in my pocket. I had to stop him. Yet part of me, a darker, whispering part, wondered what truth lay beyond that veil. Could I risk unleashing that vision upon a world bound by mundane limits? As he raised the syringe, I hurled the vial at the kerosene lamps. Flames erupted, sending shards of glass and sparks into the rafters. The lamps fell, the hum ceased, and darkness swallowed the cellar. I seized Ilias's arm. "Come on," I urged. Together, we stumbled toward the hatch. Behind us, the investigator's enraged cry echoed as the flames caught his notes and equipment. The passage trembled, dust falling from the ceiling. We emerged into the nave as fire licked the wooden beams. The flags burned, their inscriptions curling into ash. Through the shattered windows, dawn light streamed, and I realized I had halted Phase Omega, but at what cost? Elias and I fled the village, leaving the church to burn. I carry his confession now, that the grove's power is neither divine nor scientific, but both a force that demands sacrifice and grants transcendence. We remain its witnesses, bound by secrets too terrible to share. So I end this phase with a warning. The basin may lie buried beneath ruins and flame, but the currents still flow through the roots and the creek. If another seeks the truth, let this account stand as testament. Some mysteries are meant to remain submerged, their waters undisturbed. Asterisk, asterisk, the morning after the fire, Blackthorn Village lay cloaked in ash and silence. Smoke coiled above the church ruins like a portent. Elias Wren and I stood at the edge of the grove, watching tendrils of smoke drift through the blackthorn's skeletal branches. Though the altar had burned, the grove itself remained untouched, its dark limbs seemingly impervious. Elias, hollow-eyed but determined, guided me to a concealed root hollow he had discovered years before. He pried aside gnarled bark to reveal a small iron box, its surface engraved with the spiral glyph and sealed with rusted clasps. Inside lay a folded parchment and a single vial of silver dusno liquid. This time, the parchment bore Cullen's handwriting, shaky yet precise, for the final communion. The dust must be inhaled beneath the tree's apex. The body dissolves. The soul integrates into the grove. True transcendence demands relinquishment of corporeal constraints. Below the instruction, a second hand had annotated in neat block letters, Phase Omega incomplete. Requires inhalation, an exhalation cycle. Prepare for one last gathering beneath the tree of ascension. My breath caught. The investigator's notes of human trial had hinted at injection. Cullen's last design required inhalation, an elemental offering of breath itself. That night, beneath a waning crescent moon, Elias and I returned to the central tree. Its branches arched overhead like waiting arms. The air was unnaturally still. Even the rooks remained silent. We arranged 3 lanterns in a triangle to illuminate the clearing. Elias placed the iron box at the tree's base, while I set my journal on a nearby stump, witness to our final act. Elias uncorked a vial of silver dust. A faint glow pulsed within the particles, as though alive. He dipped a finger inside and held it to his lips, hesitating. I gripped his shoulder. "Once we begin," I whispered, "there's no turning back." He nodded, eyes brimming. Together, we inhaled. The dust filled our lungs with a cold, crystalline fire. For a moment, the grove's pulse synchronized with our heartbeat. The blackthorn limbs above seemed to shudder, droplets of sap glistening in the lantern light. Then came exhalation and echo of every breath we had ever drawn. The world spun into fractals of shadow and silver. I saw the faces of those lost to the basin, Mary Ellen Pryor's luminous eyes, Sister Agnes's hollow gaze, Elias's past self carving wood in silence. They flickered in and out of existence, entwined with roots and bone. I fell to my knees, gasping for air that tasted of cold metal. Elias's form blurred beside me, his silhouette one moment human, the next merging with the bark itself. I felt my own skin ripple, as if threads were unweaving. A whisper filled my mind. Asterisk, asterisk, welcome to the communion. And then, silence. The lanterns dimmed. The grove exhaled as one, a sigh that shook the earth. I opened my eyes, no longer alone, nor wholly part of this world. Roots curled around my ankles, yet I felt weightless. Elias stood before me, half human, half forest, eyes now deep hollows of silver dust. A low hum rose from the tree, resonating in my chest. I understood, in that moment, that the grove was not a thing but a nexus of faith, of science, of breath, and having breathed its dust, I had become its vessel. Elias extended a branch-like hand. "We are the keepers now," he intoned, voice layered with voices. "Will you stand watch with us?" I closed my eyes to the night sky streaked with rotting stars. Inhaling once more, I let the grove claim me fully. Dawn's light filtered through skeletal branches, as I awoke, if awake can describe a state between living thought and root-bound consciousness. The grove lay silent, but its awareness pulsed beneath my skin. Elias, no longer holy man, stood by my side. Surveying the clearing with unblinking silver eyes, we moved as one toward the creek's edge, where the water still shimmered with that iridescent glow. Each step left faint impressions in the moss, as if the earth marked our passage. Elias gestured, and I felt my lips part of their own accord. Together, we cupped the water and drank not to hydrate, but to reinforce the communion. Visions flooded me. Father Cullen's fervent prayers in the cistern, Sister Agnes's exultant laughter as her flesh dissolved, the 8 figures drifting through the nave in silent devotion. I sensed every transformation, every fracture between flesh and spirit, unified now in a vast tapestry of root and water. From the deepest current of the creek arose a shape of reflection made solid, the tree of Ascension's canopy, seen from below, infinite branches woven from bone and bark. I realized then that the grove extended far beyond Blackthorn's bounds. Veins of blackthorn weaving through every forest, every hidden hollow. Elias spoke without moving his lips. The communion spreads with every willing breath. Soon, we will awaken others. I felt no fear. Instead, a calm certainty. The world would change, horizons redrawn by the pulse of that ancient pact. And yet, the memory of mortal life lingered, a bittersweet ache in my core. I turned my gaze to you, the witness beyond time's veil. Knowing what I now know, what would you choose? To heed the call of the grove, or to stand forever apart? The grove's pulse thrummed within me like a second heartbeat as I stood before the tree of Ascension, its branches stretching beyond sight. With Elias at my side, we felt the weight of centuries, every life that had yielded breath to these roots, every seeker who had tasted the silver dust. The communion was both gift and prison, binding flesh to forest. I recalled the moment of inhalation, the fractal visions, the dissolution of self, and yet, in that unmaking, I discovered a clarity beyond human anguish, the interconnected tapestry of life and decay, of science and sacrament. To resist seemed a denial of truth. To embrace was to relinquish individuality in favor of a greater, unsettling unity. Elias extended his hand, a gesture at once human and arboreal. "We are the bridge," he intoned, voice resonant with layered echoes. Through us, the grove will awaken the world. His eyes glowed silver, reflecting the sunrise through skeletal limbs. I hesitated. Beyond the grove lay Blackthorn Village, its ruins, still smoldering, stories buried in ash. Beyond that lay the broader world, rivers, cities, forests untouched. By this ancient covenant, to spread the communion further would reshape all mortal lands. Are we bound to this place? I wondered aloud. Can the grove reach beyond these hills? Elias's gaze drifted to the creek. Water travels, roots entwine. The seed lies dormant until stirred. I looked down at my hands, skin veined with bark, fingers tapering into tendrils. The transformation was irreversible. My mind echoed. With voices, the enthusiastic prayer of Cullen, the despairing scream of Sister Agnes, the silent vigil of the ape, all converged into a singular purpose. A wind stirred the branches overhead, and the tree groaned an invitation, or a command. I inhaled slowly, tasting the metallic temps of dawn. Whatever remained of my old self recognized this as the final moment, to spread the dust of communion beyond Blackthorn, or to remain as its guardian, sacrificing the promise of expansion. Will you lead them? I asked Elias, or shall I? He bowed, leaves rustling. We are one. With that, we began our journey. From the grove's edge, we stepped into the world beyond roots, extending like synapses, seeking fresh hosts. The creek-fed rivers that coursed through towns and cities. The dust rode the wind into open lungs. The communion had begun its silent expansion. As we walked, my journal lay beneath the tree, pages spread by the dawn breeze, telling of Mary Ellen's nightmares, of convulsions in the cistern, of the silent choir in the nave. The account would survive, even if I did not, and perhaps those words, carried by unsuspecting eyes, might warn or invite the next seeker. To you, who read this final entry, know that the tree of ascension still grows, its canopy now touching distant horizons. The promise of transcendence beckons in every drop of water, every breath of air. The choice remains yours, to inhale the dust and join the communion, or to turn away, preserving the fragile self that the grove will inevitably claim. I stepped forward, into the world, neither wholly man nor entirely tree, my voice now a chorus of countless echoes. Listen for the rustle in the leaves, the shimmer upon the water, the call beneath your breath, and ask yourself, will you answer